Welcome to another deep dive episode of the Outside of the Classroom podcast. Let's come back to the topic of strategy and how it actually gets executed. Even when organizations are clear on what they're trying to do, progress can still break down. Achieving strategic objectives doesn't break because of effort. It often breaks because what's required to achieve them is often underdefined. From the outside, it can still look like things are moving. Teams are active, work is happening, momentum appears to be building. But over time, something starts to feel a little off. Progress slows, coordination needs to increase, and effort starts to expand. This often becomes visible when a strategy begins to ask more of the organization. For example, when a company decides to move upmarket, the objective is clear: pursue larger customers, offer a higher quality product, operate at a different level. But that decision carries requirements that are not always made explicit. What does it actually take to support a more complex customer? Does a sales process still work? Or does it require a different type of salesperson entirely? Does pricing reflect a new value being offered, or is it still anchored in an earlier positioning? Are incentives aligned with the longer sales cycle and more complex deals? Is there an internal support model that can meet these higher expectations? Do teams know how to engage with these customers, or are they learning in real time? And how's the organization actually perceived? Is a brand associated with this higher level of offering, or does the market still see it differently? None of these questions are abstract. They're all part of what the strategy requires, but they're not always defined. So what happens instead? The organization continues to operate as it did before, and the gap begins to show. More coordination is needed, more conversations take place, and more effort is required to move things forward. Not because the strategy is wrong, but because what it requires hasn't been fully worked through. Part of the reason this happens is that organizations tend to carry forward how they've always operated, how decisions are made, how work moves, how teams are structured. Those assumptions were often valid at an earlier stage, but they don't always get revisited. They get carried forward into a different context. Strategy introduces something different. It asks the organization to do things it is not currently set up to do. And that shift is not always fully understood. Progress doesn't begin with activity, it begins with definition. What capabilities are required? How should work actually flow? Where do decisions sit? What needs to exist for this to happen consistently? Until those questions are answered, the organization will continue to rely on effort to compensate. This is where things begin to change. Not when people work harder, but when what is required is made explicit. Strategy introduces new demands, and when those demands aren't clearly defined, effort becomes a substitute for design, and the organization works harder than it should. Thank you for listening.